Alright, here we go with the video notes on cells. In this unit we're going to talk about the different types of cells that exist, and then we're going to talk about the different parts of the cell, so all the different organelles that make up a cell, and finally we'll talk about how cells can be built upon each other to go from something as simple as a cell to something as complex as something like you. One of the first theories in biology is a cell theory. Remember, again, the theory is not just a wild hunch, but something that's backed up with a lot of evidence. Three parts to the cell theory. First thing is all living things are made out of cells. Anything that's alive is made out of cells. You learned about that during our first unit. The second part of the cell theory is that cells are the basic unit of structure and function in an organism. So things smaller than a cell don't really function as life itself. They can aid in life, but they're not considered alive. And three, cells come only from the reproduction of existing cells. Cells don't come from magic. They come from other cells. So what is a cell? A cell is the smallest unit of matter that can carry on life. So like I said just a second ago, there are parts of the cells that are smaller, or things within a cell, but they are not individually alive themselves. They can help carry on life, but they aren't actually alive. The cells were first discovered by Robert Hooke in 1665. And every cell is then surrounded by a cell membrane, and then that cell membrane contains structures within the cell that have specialized jobs. These things are called organelles, right? And these are basically like mini organs. So like your liver and kidneys are different organs within your body that help you do things. Cells have organs or organelles within their body that help them accomplish different tasks. The cell membrane is probably one of the most important parts of the cell. All cells have a cell membrane, and this is often called the phospholipid bilayer. We talked about last unit in lipids, saying they're a big part of the cell membrane. The cell membrane is this phospholipid part, so they got the lipids in there, and the lipids are actually down here in the middle. So those round heads are the phosphate group, and the lipids are on the inside. And basically, think about oil and water, they don't mix, right? So this is the oily part. These guys, they don't mind water, so whenever you drop these phospholipids into water, they pretty much turn into this phospholipid bilayer all on their own, because you've got these parts that don't mind water and these parts that hate water, and they automatically orient themselves this way. And so you've got the water inside the cell, water on the outside of the cell, and you've got this cell membrane in between that's keeping stuff out. Kind of the cool thing about the phospholipid bilayer is that it's selectively permeable, right? Some things can come in, and some things it keeps out. So it's sort of like the bouncer in a nightclub. It decides who comes in and who doesn't. And so all of this allows that cell membrane to be the most important organelle in maintaining homeostasis for the cell, right? Keeping a balance for what needs to be in, when it needs to be out of the cell. And we'll focus a lot more about things coming in and out of the cell in a couple units. As you probably know, cells are always really, really small. Why are they so small? How come you never have a cell that's the size of a basketball or the size of a car or something like that? They're always really tiny. You need to have microscopes to see them. Well, the reason for this has to do with the way they get their food. As a cell grows, it needs more food and more materials, obviously, just as when you grow you need more food, but there's less surface area for that stuff to enter. This is kind of a weird concept. It's a little bit hard to understand, but this is the concept of surface area to volume ratio. So how much surface area is there per given unit of volume? And one way we could look at this that might be helpful is to kind of look at comparison of some hypothetical cells. So imagine you had a cell that were a cube. Now cells aren't really cubes, they're usually blobs, although plant cells could be cubes. And we have a small cell, let's say it's 1 millimeter on each side, so 1 millimeter cubed. So quickly the surface area of that would be 6 square millimeters, and its volume would be 1 millimeter cubed, which would give it a surface to volume ratio of 6:1. Now what happens if the cell gets bigger? Right, now we make a 2 millimeter cell. So now its surface area is a lot bigger, right? And its volume is bigger, but it's not growing equally. Now the ratio between them is 3:1. and you can probably see where this is going as we keep going. A bigger cell, still a 3 millimeter cell, has a bigger surface area and a bigger volume, but again, that ratio is decreasing. So why is that important? Well, like I said, you could think of volume as being like the amount of stuff a cell needs, right? The bigger the cell is, the more stuff it needs to get in. Let's say it's bigger, it needs more food. Surface area, think of as almost like the mouths for that cell, right? Because all the food has to come across the surface area, that cell membrane. So when a cell is small, for example, it needs 1 unit of stuff, and there's 6 doors for that to get in, right? That's pretty good ratio. Really easy to get that stuff in. As it gets bigger, now it needs 8 units of stuff, and there's 24 doors. So that ratio is a lot smaller. As you get even bigger, now you get a lot of stuff to come in, but still more doors, but the ratio is not the same, 2 to 1. It's like you had to fill a warehouse, and you had to get a whole lot of stuff in there, but there wasn't as many doors, versus something that has a lot of doors. You can get more stuff into that warehouse quickly. And it also goes the other way too. The bigger we are, the more waste you produce, so stuff has to get out. So it all comes down to that surface area to volume ratio. It's something that's actually really important, even though it might be kind of hard to wrap your head around. So basically, a smaller cell can get more food in and get more waste out than a larger cell. So a larger cell wouldn't be able to feed itself, and its waste would just build up, which obviously is not a good thing either, so the cell would die. There are 2 main types of cells. They're prokaryotic cells, or they're more basic cells. These are the types of cells that don't have a whole lot going on. Right? They have a cell membrane, and they have a cell wall, so they have 2 different layers of protection. The cell membrane still is what keeping stuff in and out. The cell wall, in this case, is more for structure. They do not have a nucleus or any other what we call membrane-bound organelles. They don't have any organelles that are made out of membranes. What it does have is really simple. It has ribosomes, which we'll learn about a little bit, and it has DNA that's kind of chilling out in there. So this being a prokaryotic cell, for example, a bacteria, that's the most common example of a prokaryote. The DNA just chilling anywhere in there, and all these little dots that you see, those are all ribosomes. That's all there is to it. DNA and ribosomes and cell wall and a cell membrane. And we compare that, for example, to the other type of cell, a eukaryote or a eukaryotic cell. These guys have a cell membrane. They all have a cell membrane. Cell wall in plants only, though, not in animal cells. So animal cells, just a cell membrane. Plant cells have a cell membrane and a cell wall. These guys have a nucleus, true nucleus, and they have all these what we call membrane-bound organelles, a bunch of organelles that are made out of membranes that we're going to learn about over the next couple slides. So all these other organelles that you see are all made out of membranes. They still have the ribosomes, they still have the DNA inside the nucleus. But these are much, much more advanced cells.